Diary of a Man in Despair. Friedrich Reck. January 1940.
Unity Mitford, of whom I have spoken before, has committed suicide. She tried first to shoot herself in a Munich hotel. But she only managed to wound herself. Then, taken back to London, she was more successful with poison and died there. It was the most sensible thing the lady, who saw herself as the Queen of Germany alongside our Adonis, could have done. Seriously, and with all due respect for the dead, male hysterics do quite enough damage when they get into history. But females who manage to get up on the heights are even worse. And worst of all among them is the would-be savior type. We have enough of this species, titled Nazisses, by the man in the street. England has another class of this genus, a type of female who clutches her Gandhi's white loincloth. The English should be thankful that there is one fewer, at least. In the interim, we have a new scandal making the rounds in Munich. This one concerns Herr Fischer, managing director of Herr Hitler's very own Operettenhaus Theater on the Gartnerplatz. Fischer is also a protégé of Gauleiter Wagner, and as such is richly hated by Eberstein, the Munich police chief, who is Wagner's deadly enemy. Herr Fischer dined recently with an extremely young lady in the Regina Hotel, and slyly reserved a double room for the night. They went upstairs around midnight. Shortly thereafter, a piercing cry for help rang out down the floor. Everyone rushed to the scene, and two young men from the adjoining rooms dashed inside. They found the young lady wearing pajamas, in a state of considerable disarray, while Herr Fischer wore nothing but his ring. The maiden exclaimed tearfully that though she was not quite 15, Herr Fischer had tried to rape her, and she then proceeded to describe Herr Fischer to his face in terms used especially in the Giesing suburb of Munich. The two men who had come to the rescue now revealed themselves to be members of the Gestapo, and Herr Fischer was arrested on the basis of the girl's cry and her tender age. The rest I was told by the owner of the Regina. The girl and the Gestapo agents were all under orders from Eberstein, who hoped in this way to compromise and eliminate at least one of his enemy's followers, and this ass promptly sauntered into the neat little trap. He is now supposed to appear at the prosecuting attorney's office, and after that to be whisked off the scene, but I doubt that this will happen. Almost certainly, he will rise cork-like to the surface of this rich brew of sewage and blood and tears again. Suddenly there he will be, rejuvenated and cleansed of sin. And the whole process will take as little time as it did to rehabilitate the head of the Nazis' Motor Transport Corps, Oldenburg, who was supposed to go to jail for profiteering in cognac. Herr Julius Streicher, the Third Reich's great Heldentenor of anti-Semitism, was convicted by a jury of his Gauleiter peers for having taken bribes from rich Nuremberg Jews. Rumor was that he had been shot, but I was convinced from the start that not a hair of his head would be touched. Just as I predicted, Streicher, who committed perjury a couple of years before the assumption of power, came through safe and sound. He now rules over the estate he acquired, God knows how, and he is supposed to stay there. The latest is that the great man himself now has a mistress, named Eva Braun. Of course, we all know what the circumstances are, and the lady should really be described as a maîtresse en titre. She has been installed in one of the luxury villas erected on the Obersalzberg by her lover, close enough to be accessible at any time. There she plays at being First Lady of the Third Reich, if not Empress, dispenses chastisement and grace with fine impartiality, and is much sought after for her good offices by suppliants threatened by concentration camp. A prankish official who eavesdropped on a long-distance telephone conversation between the two of them has reported that Hitler figuratively cried on the blonde bosom of his girlfriend about the huge quantities of hormones and injections of vitamins being put into him. Nota bene, there is a complete harem of young girls on the Obersalzberg, who attend on Great Caesar exactly as their forerunners did on Bockelsen. Like the young David who played on his lyre for Saul when that monarch was depressed, these girls dance for the king, who was formerly resident of a furnished room on Bererstrasse, in Munich, when he feels unhappy. As with Bockelsen, these young girls come almost entirely from families of Prussian nobility. They were procured and are presented in tasteful array before divine and august Caesar by the procuress Frau von D., who was formerly secretary of the now renamed Herrenclub, in Berlin. Perhaps, when the inevitable cleansing of this Augean stable begins, we might start by rerouting everything belonging to this harem in the direction it should have taken, toward the South American bordellos. And how would it be if at the same time the noble families who have allowed their names to be soiled by membership in the SS, the Gestapo, and the SA were removed forever from the register of nobility? I am a conservative, but I declare that the coming revolution will give Germany its very last chance to put its house in order. If it lets this chance go by too, it will remain forever what it now is and what its bourgeois has been for a long time, a cesspool. And I include in this designation all of the Prussian nobility, with a few notable exceptions. Our German Pericles has also been involved in another little matter, the suicide of his niece in 1930. It has never been explained why the girl should have taken her own life in his quarters on Prinzregentenstrasse shortly before Christmas of that year. There are people who claim that the girl had been having an affair with a Jew, and shot herself out of guilt and fear. But there are hints of other things. It appears that even at that time a great deal was covered up, that even under the Weimar Republic there were officials in the police department and the prosecuting attorney's office who were ready to help the coming man with little services of this kind.